All right, Studio Steve, episode 3. We're talking strictly Eastern Conference Finals today. The man you see behind me, Kentucky graduate Tyler Herro. If you didn't know his name, number 14, Miami Heat. Everybody knows who he is now. Had a monster game in Game 4 of this Eastern Conference Finals. I'm actually bringing in a special guest today, my man Chris Moore. We're here to talk some basketball. We're here to talk some Heat. Here to talk some Celtics, maybe get into a little bit of discussion about what's going on in the West, maybe touch a little bit of base on the whole NBA bubble experience as a whole. So as I say again, welcome to Studio Steve, episode 3. And without further ado, I'm going to bring in.
There we go.
You got to turn your music down in the background, big boy.
You hear it?
Yeah.
All right.
There we go.
It's a little in the back.
Love it. No, it's it'll interfere.
Too bad. All right.
It's all right.
All right.
Well, you know what? First and foremost, welcome to the show, Chris. Studio Steve, episode 3.
Episode
pleasure. 3. Yeah. It's a pleasure to have you here, man. You know,
I'm gonna max my screen up here.
Yeah. Here we go.
Jesus, why do you look prettier than I do?
Yeah, you're in the dark. You're on some Michael Moore shit.
My last name is Moore. Right. Is that something better than?
Yeah, there you go, man. Yeah.
Something better than that.
There you go.
All right. Still ugly. That's all right. I'll live.
It's all love. All love. We're here to talk basketball anyway. It's not a beauty contest. But as I was saying, you know, we're talking about the Eastern Conference Finals here. If you didn't know his name, everybody knows it now. Tyler Herro, Kentucky graduate, rookie, 20 years old, youngest player in the entire playoffs right now. Monster game in Game 4. And they needed it. Miami needed it because the rest of the guys really weren't playing the way they're normally capable of playing. Mm-hmm. And as the playoffs go, you and I watch basketball our whole lives. You know that sometimes you got the X factor. Tyler Herro, been kind of watching the Heat, you know, off and on. You don't really get a lot of broadcasting games in Canada of the Heat, but the games I did watch, you could see him, and you knew that something was special about him. But this last game, I don't know, man. I don't know what he ate for breakfast. He had his Wheaties.
I wouldn't know, man. Some people would say he's been prepping his whole life for this moment, man. And that's only he can't even drink yet in the States. He's 20. Not a legal age. He can't buy his own beer, own booze at the club, I guess. Yeah. So I was listening to another podcast today talking about the game, and somebody brought up the fact that when he was 14, he jumped on Twitter for the first time. And his Twitter handle, this was a pretty kind of funny point. It was his Twitter handle was, and I forget exactly what it was called, but it was like RF Hero or RFT Hero, which is like rich and famous hero, right? So like this kid had it sorted at 14 and realized that dream way earlier than any of us ever get close to.
Yeah.
It's hilarious to look at that guy, that kid. Sorry, not that guy. That kid. Let's call him a kid because it's kind of what he is relative to me. I'm twice his age. But what he has done and how he has the swag and the rapport and the insane confidence. Those are 2 words that have been used to describe him from all the talking heads, from all the hype around this kid. It's just the insane confidence to be able to just hit step backs, juke guys, make cuts, like dive to the rim, and no fear. I mean, he's living a dream that we all want, right? To live with no fear and do it on the biggest stage in a bubble, but, with no fans, which, I'm not sure how that factors in. It does factor, but, man, that it's just you just root for that kid. You just root for him.
You do. Yeah, 100% you root for him.
You it's like you respect that game and you root for that kid. And I can't get enough. I want to see what he does next game. I want to see what how they game for him, because they're going to start. If Celtics a game plan for him now, so they got a game plan. Celtics got a game plan for Adebayo. They got a game plan for Jimmy Butler, and they got a game plan for Tyler Herro and Duncan Robinson, right? So who am I looking? Do they let the game plan for Jay Crowder? Maybe not, but right, like that's 4 or 5. It's pretty good, right? If you're the Heat. So, and Boston, ain't looking good. Ain't looking good.
No, not looking good, but not looking horrible either. Like the games haven't been they haven't been blowouts. Let me just quickly touch on
that sounds like a pick. Sounds like a pick 'em there.
Yeah. Let me touch on Tyler Herro real quick before we get away from him, get more into the game, the rest of the series. But I made a few notes here to watching this last game, and there was a point in the fourth quarter with 2:40 to go where he tipped out a rebound, which is a 3-point game at that time. It tipped out the rebound. The Heat subsequently scored on that play, stretched it out to 5, and they just continued to do that as Boston chipped away at that lead and got it smaller and smaller and got closer and closer. This kid just seemed to have an answer on every end. And like you were saying, we talk about the swagger, we talk about the confidence, the way he's playing the game as a 20-year-old rookie. He looks like he's been there already. And he's making these moves on really good defensive players, on really good defensive team with Boston as well, quick lateral guys. And he's just making these Euro steps and these floaters, shooting threes with crazy confidence. Like it's something else, right? It almost seems like he has, he did his like Jason Tatum homework, and he's pulling off the same moves that Jason Tatum pulls off in a game. And he looks smooth, man. Like he's obviously carried them last game. Like you say, they got a game plan for him a bit now. If you're Boston, if they already hadn't been game planning for him, they're going to have to game plan for him a little bit more. But one of the players you touched on there that I do want to talk about, because something happened in the late stages of that last game, was Bam Adebayo with that wrist. And it looked like he was significantly hurt. I think it was his left wrist, and he just was not really giving it any real strength to it, and he was just really letting it show that was something that was hurting him. So going forward, like, what does this look like now? If you got a game plan for a Tyler Herro, do you have to potentially, if you're Eric Spoelstra, do you have to potentially game plan thinking that Bam might not play? They're pretty tight-lipped about it right now, but if he does play, how effective is he going to be going forward?
Ooh, all right. Wow. I'm going to say that like the bio on Bam is that he works hard. He comes from, a background of not of means, right? Just hard work, guts, right? I got to figure he's going to be there. Like whatever happened to his wrist. I mean, if Jason Tatum didn't break it on that dunk, right? Like, he got through that, right? I don't know, but you're right. He was laboring. He was holding it. It went on for like, I don't know, like another couple minutes of the game, like where he's just kind of like, holding it like somebody shot him. And I don't know. That's an interesting point. I don't know. I think he's going to play. How effective he is, like what lingers from that injury remains to be seen. We will all know, and tomorrow night's game.
Tomorrow night.
Yeah. So every other day, it's what it is in the playoffs, right? In the bubble, it's every other day, no travel. So I got to think that if he is significantly impacted, then there is going to be some comeuppance for the Heat, right? Because everything that he does is everything that they need. It's everything that every team wants, because he is an MVP player. Honest to God, like Bam Adebayo has been coming up. Like you and I are both Raps fans. We played the Heat. It was always Bam's going to go against Bam. Right? We got Serge. Serge is good. Serge can match, but Bam is younger, and he's got heart, he's got drive, he's got guts, he's got energy for days, like Pascal back in the day, right? And I just think that whatever happens going forward for him, or whatever that impact is going to tell a huge story in this next game. And you're absolutely right. I will bet the farm that he will play. His effectiveness remains to be seen.
Yeah, I think whether or not. I think you're right. I think he will suit up. I think he'll be on the court. He'll play. His effectiveness obviously will be told as of next game. I think Tyler Herro having that breakout game last game doesn't necessarily mean that he's going to continue on that warpath for the rest of this series, right? Like, I think, as I say, that they needed that because Jimmy Butler really wasn't playing Jimmy Butler ball. Like, he seems to just come awake in the clutch moments of the game, which you can't fret and hate. But at the same time, I had mentioned this earlier in the week that you want your superstars to come out in the first and second quarters too. You want them to be an impact. You want them to at least kind of set the tone. And of course, he's going to show up in the fourth and the late stages of the third as well. He's going to go to the free throw line. Jimmy Butler in this series is 23 for 27 from the free throw line. So he's getting to the basket and he's scoring at the free throw line. And, he's getting those calls, but he gets those calls because he goes aggressive. He plays aggressively.
Goes to home.
And I think, we go back to Tyler Herro, not really, he had an amazing game. I personally don't think he's going to put up 37 every game. And we talk about game planning moving forward. You start to think about defensively who Boston might now put on him. Are they going to go one-on-one? Are they going to maybe move a Marcus Smart out to him, get an agitator on him, someone to really get under his skin, really aggressive with him, hit him, bump him off the ball, get him on those screens? Or do they do what Eric Spoelstra is doing? And do they go zone defense?
Well, I think that Boston effectively solved that zone in Game 3. I think they showed that, you just can't keep running the shit back on us all the time and not expect an adjustment that will work. And they did that. I mean, Toronto, Nick Nurse, like that man ran all kinds of zone adaptations. And, Boston just had the talent to get over the top. And, I don't want to belabor, and we didn't really have a chance to get into the Raps thing. And everything seems to migrate back into the Raps as far as basketball goes in my head. But, full disclaimer, I am not rooting for Boston. I am not rooting for Boston. I don't want to see Boston go past. I don't think they're the better team. I think Jason Tatum is he's an elite player, and his legend is in the making. And there's no one that would argue that point.
And his legend would have been further cemented last game had they won, because he scored 0 points in the first half and then came out and scored 28
points. Which brings that we've been talking about Bam and some obvious injury problems, right? That he's going to have to fight through. Many people are saying that Jason Tatum has some undisclosed injuries. Ergo, his offer in the last game. Ergo for his diminished production. And whatever, if it is a thing and he's simply just hiding it because he's that tough a guy, or if he's just not injured at all, he's just cold and it happens, right? But that is another byline that people are looking hard at. And because most of the globe is still in this, pandemic situation where everybody is, semi in lockdown now, but like everybody's paying a lot of attention to this, and the micromanaging is on because people are still locked up and they're still in their homes and they're watching every game frame by frame, running it back and playing it literally one frame by frame. And a lot of the scuttlebutt is that something's wrong with Tatum. So, again, which kind of speaks to this offer that he had in the last game. So if that is the case, is it an offset or is it just speculation?
Yeah.
Now, one thing you said earlier, I do want to comment on before we go back to Herro, okay? Herro, you and I have talked ad nauseum about Last Dance, like most people that love basketball have. And I think it's episode 5 or 6 where it's Bulls versus Hornets in the first or second round. And they cut to
JB Armstrong.
JB Armstrong, that's right. And JB's talking about, I just had a moment. I had a game, right? Everybody can get hot, or anybody can get hot, right? Depending. And you could look at Herro and say, maybe he had a game. He had a BJ Armstrong game, right? He just floored it for 37 points, and no one is expecting that, tomorrow. So if that's the case, right, the next game again will tell if it was just a flash in the pan or if it's going to be a more consistent production. I think, honestly, that there's nobody out there saying that Tyler Herro was a flash in the pan. If he completely loses his confidence, right? Like it was some kind of Kwame Brown situation, right? Where Jimmy Butler jumps on him like Jordan on Kwame Brown, and just tries to destroy his confidence for some, stupid reason or whatever. And then he just goes over in the next game and misses, takes 10 threes and misses, gets 1 for 9, but anyway, there's a bit of the, as impressive as Herro was, there's a bit of a pump the brakes situation with that byline in this series.
Yeah. On that note, he went under Jimmy Butler's wing as a rookie to start this season and trains with him at 4 a.m. every morning. So he's dedicated to playing. Right? Jimmy Butler's already been on him from day one.
With Dragic too, or maybe he's both. I don't know.
Yeah, well, Jimmy Butler and Dragic actually are best friends on that team.
Well, fuck.
Yeah, they're best friends.
So you run the podcast, bro.
yeah. So I mean, they got a tight unit. Their stars are playing, really cohesively on the floor, and it shows because they have a relationship off the floor. And then you look at a guy like Herro, who's under the wing of 2 veteran players, really good veteran players, and he's, I think that's where he gets his confidence is kind of speaks for itself. And he said that in the post-game interview with Rachel Nichols after the game. He said, "I've always been like this." And going back to your 14-year-old story of him, with the Twitter handle and everything, he has that swag, he has that confidence. And you know what? To play in the professional, you have to have it.
Yeah.
Right. And going back to the Tatum thing, you don't get to the Eastern Conference Finals without an injury. Everyone's injured at this point in some way or another. He did go, and go up 0 in the first half, but then he put up 28 in that second half, and he looked good putting up that 28. So, whether or not that plays out moving forward, we'll see. But I mean, the guy's averaging 40 minutes a game. So when you're playing 40 minutes a game, I get it that you're 22, but you're playing the, basketball at the highest level. It's going to be a little bit of wear and tear, right? It's going to wear down on you. And you play a team like Miami on top of that, that's going to beat you up. Every time you go to the rack, it's nothing easy, right? They're making it hard on everyone, every play. So we'll see how that plays out. I think that Boston, Tatum is Tatum. And, I think that Jaylen Brown quietly produces just as well as Tatum on certain nights. And then some nights he sort of, disappears.
He checks out, right? You know what? No, let me rephrase that. He checks in, and sometimes he doesn't execute. And that's the difference in Jaylen Brown. And for the record, as much as I disliked him against the Raptors, that's how effective he was. And all of his post-game interviews that I watched religiously, like on YouTube, everyone that took the podium, I was the nerd, like on YouTube, like, ooh, who's next? Right? Like, Nick Nurse, hooray. And then the Boston Celtics exit interviews too. And Jaylen Brown, like when they, after game 3, when OG hit that shot and he was like, disgusted, right? Like, I felt so good watching that. I was like, so good. On pancakes, it was really tasty to watch him do that. However, I really like him as a player. I think he's a fantastic player. I like him every bit as much as I like Jason Tatum. He is not in that echelon. He's like 2 degrees of separation versus 6. But he is a quality player, an elite player that will be reckoned with in the future. I mean, I think most people feel that Jason Tatum is already in the Hall of Fame. Like he's going to get there. Yeah, like 10 years hence, when his career is done, he's going to have 2 or 3 championships. He's going to have the stats. Unless he gets injured, barring some kind of monumental collapse, right? He's going to be there in the end, right? Just like our boy Kel Lowry. But Jaylen Brown is a quality player. I like his game. I like his effort. I like his. He's
got hops.
Oh, the hops is good. No, he's totally athletic, but he's a young player. I mean, these guys are all young. That's why people love the Celtics so much. It's because all these core of young, budding superstars are all very young. Mm-hmm. And the potential is in the future, and it is the ceiling is the sky, right? Like it's satellites. Yeah. And Hayward is an interesting X factor. Mm-hmm. Like his insertion back into the lineup, right, on like some minutes restrictions, like Jordan back from a broken foot, right? Like, put me in for the best 7 minutes, but coach, right? Like, yeah, I think Hayward's addition has proven, even though he's not scoring necessarily, he is distributing. He is making the right play. His defense is, a little porous, but that's to be expected. He just had another kid, by the way. Like, he's on his fourth kid. He's got 3 girls and a little boy he just had.
Yeah.
So, or is going to have, I think, or something. I remember hearing on one of the shows I'm talking about Gordon Hayward's, 4th child.
Right.
So, I mean, all that put together, think of what a new kid did for Freddie Van Vliet last year.
I was just gonna say that.
Don't discount it.
Yeah.
Yeah. So this is for real.
Well,
go.
Sorry, yeah, but we talked about that because we watched Game 3 together, and that was the first game he played back. And I remember you said that explicitly, that you think Gordon Hayward's coming back in the lineup was going to make a difference for the Celtics. It did that game because they won that game. And you're right. I've been watching him play, and like you say, his defense isn't going to be there. He's coming off this injury. He's coming off a long layoff of not playing competitive ball. And what a time to be reinserted into the lineup. The Eastern Conference Finals. These guys are playing do or die, right? They're trying to get back, like the Miami Heat, trying to get back to the finals since 2014, right? And at this rate, considering what happened in tonight's game with the Nuggets and the Lakers, potentially going to meet up with the guy that won them a few championships in LeBron James, right? If the Lakers get past the Nuggets, who knows? The Nuggets come back from 3-1 twice in a row. You're looking at a different team. You're playing against 2 potential.
I love that story, right?
Yeah,
it's a great story. Doesn't everybody like? I mean, if you want to talk, if you want to see a definition of Cinderella, right? Like, that is what the Nuggets are, right? Yeah. Like, even more so than Boston. And it's funny because the Boston players are pretty much on par age-wise, right? Like, I mean, Marcus Smart is, 27, 28? He's like one of the oldest players there on Boston. But, I mean, people think about the Nuggets, they think of Jokic and Murray, obviously. Props to Kitchener, as you say, on your last podcast. Let's not get off topic, though. I mean, like, I think that when it comes to the Boston 5, and Tice has played really well too. I didn't like him against the Raptors because he was really effective, more effective than Gasol, which still hurts. But I think that that Heat team is, if everyone being healthy, is far superior. Duncan Robinson. Do you have his stats on hand?
I don't have stats offhand for Duncan Robinson because he really hasn't had any great stats this series, right?
Yeah, I was wondering about what was he 1 for 6 in the last game? I can't even, like, he didn't even really notice him. Right? And I mean, like, he's a cat that's literally was just plucked out of nowhere, right? And he is now identified universally among the association as an elite dead-eye shooter on par with Redick, and better than Kyle Korver. And you know what I mean? Like, all those like, corner 3 guys, or guys that just the catch and shoot guys, I should say, right? Like, he is among the top 5, top 3 even in the league this year.
I think he was top 2. I think he actually had the most 3-pointers scored in the season, right? So in the season, when you're playing a different team every day, that doesn't necessarily have the time to prepare for you, the travel involved, everything that comes with a regular normal NBA season, they can get away with that. They can get away with Duncan Robinson coming off screens and just being a catch and shoot guy. But we talked about this earlier in this series as well, that when you get a guy who can't really play defense and you're playing that same team over and over, they'll find ways to expose you really quick. And you mentioned this as well, that this is partly the reason perhaps that Eric Spoelstra has gone to this zone to kind of hide this guy. But regardless of how they've tried to hide him, he's constantly getting in foul trouble. He's off the floor, which means he can't produce. So when he's not producing, this is where you start going into your bench a little bit and thinking, okay, Andre Iguodala is playing a lot more now because you're getting the vet come in, you're getting the defensive guy, he's getting steals.
Well, they got him.
Smart plays. Yeah, exactly, for this time of the year. So you see a guy like Duncan Robinson, like, I think when we talked earlier about the team and the types of adjustments you have to make and the game plan you have to make for the players on the opposite team. I think Duncan Robinson's kind of being filtered out now. Now I think they're starting to think, okay, who cares about Duncan Robinson, really? Like, if he's going to hit buckets, he's got to prove that to us, right? And he hasn't really proved it to them this series. So you get a guy like Iguodala comes in. Kelly Olynyk, I think, even gives him quality minutes.
Yeah.
He comes in, he can stretch the floor out because he can hit the three. He's a bit of an agitator, so he can play in the paint. He'll go down an offensive rebound and those types of things, right? He's kind of a garbage player in terms of like garbage man down in the paint, getting the offensive, defensive rebound,
for him.
Playing chippy, right? Like, so he does that. So yeah, Duncan Robinson, I think, has kind of been he's kind of been nullified in this series, if anything. Like, and we talked about Boston, in terms of their speed and their athleticism, and they do that on both sides of the floor. Like against Toronto, we saw this, and against Miami, we're seeing it too. They score in a hurry. Like, they'll come down and they'll put up a bucket and they'll get to the rack really quickly.
Thinking about the Duncan Robinson thing, and my perspective is on basketball is always viewed through the Raptors lens, and that's just how I am since inception. So you think about a guy on the Raptors like Matt Thomas, right? So here you got dead eye shooter, a little bit streaky as three guys are.
Mm-hmm.
You love to play him, but you got to hide him on defense. So you play zones.
Mm-hmm.
You play diamond and one. You play box. You play just straight up zones, right? It's the same idea with Duncan Robinson, even though Duncan Robinson is taller, right? And gets more PT, obviously.
Mm-hmm.
Right? Like there's a mirror image there as far as what you need to do when you put that guy in the game. Mm-hmm. What is he going to give you? Is he going? Is he not going? If he's not going, he's hurting you on D because he's fouling up the storm. He's taking himself out of the game even by just, hacking guys and, being slow, not moving his feet, right? Like, if guys are engaged, the coaches like Nick Nurse and Eric Spoelstra, right? Who, it's funny, I remember back in the day in the LeBron days with the Heat, when Spoelstra was just like the new guy, and it was all about who's going to last. Is LeBron going to chew him up and spit him out, right? Like, I guess, Pat Riley, who's got 6 decades in the association of experience, knows how to pick a coach, because Spo is still there. Spo is still dealing, and he has got the soldiers on the court right now, right? Mm-hmm. And he has got the respect that I think people were giving Nick Nurse last year, even though Nick Nurse won Coach of the Year this year, based largely on what he did with Kawhi last year in this abbreviated season. Spo, has been running with what works with that zone. It worked for the first 2 games. Boston made some adjustments, and then there were some other adjustments made. And then Miami won that game again, right? Like, so, I don't know. I think that, that whole Duncan Robinson thing is he will find a way to get his shot off, right? But he has to figure out a way to play some defense. That's not going to hurt the team and not going to hurt his PT on the court.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, just, to touch on Spo real quick, I was watching, I think it was an ESPN. They did a little thing on him, and he has been in the organization with the Miami Heat for years. And he started off in the basement, like going through tapes and trying to figure out strategies and schemes and all types of things. And so he came up within the ranks, under Pat Riley's wing. And he's actually now the most tenured coach in the Eastern Conference. And I think just behind Greg Popovich is the most tenured coach in the league right now. And so, he's done his job. There was obviously, we remember the early days with LeBron, like you're talking about. Remember the shoulder bump, LeBron going back to the bench and give him a little bump or a little nudge in the midst of a game. And so, there was all of that talk of like, it's LeBron's team, it's LeBron's town. How long is this guy going to last? And he got him a few championships. You imagine the Eagles he was dealing with that team at that time, right?
Yeah.
And so he's been a huge staple of that organization in terms of getting him back to where I think they wanted to be since drafting Dwayne Wade. 2 last things I just want to touch on with this series, because I just want to transition into the bubble experience. But 2 last things I want to touch on in the series. A really cool stat that I came across today: the cumulative score in this series between the Heat and Celtics is 441 to 441.
What?
That is
okay. Yeah. Okay. You had everything up, right? Okay.
So the cumulative score of all the games combined is 440, even at 441. So that's remarkable, right? That's what I say when we talk about, it's a lopsided in terms of the 3-1, but the series is a lot closer when we look at it, in detail. And I think that there hasn't really been blowouts. Both teams are scoring really well and playing defense and executing really well. So that leads me to, of course, do the Heat close it out tomorrow night and get back to the NBA Finals for the first time since 2014? Or does Boston still have something to prove and come out and do what they've kind of done all year and really kind of prove people wrong?
All right. Is this the point where you say pick it?
This is the point where I say pick it.
All right. I say Boston. This next game. I think they got fight. I think that, honestly, as we mentioned earlier, it depends on what Bam's status is.
Mm-hmm.
It's not like it's his knees. It's not like it's his ankles. His mobility necessarily isn't impacted. You would think from what that injury looks like on the wrist. Was it a shooting wrist? I can't recall right now.
It's his offhand.
Okay, so with that, if he is able to perform up to his potential, and still, I think Boston makes the push. I think Marcus Smart is gonna throw some water bottles and scream at some people. I think he's gonna, snap some towels and some bare asses. And I think he's gonna push them. I don't think Boston has got this far. I mean, when they got past the Raps, even without Kawhi, it was a hard-fought, grizzled, heart of a champion kind of series.
Mm-hmm.
And I still maintain that if Kyle Lowry hadn't fouled out, that we had the shot to win that game, or at least tie it to get to OT.
Mm-hmm.
I don't think Freddie was ready for that moment. But I think that they've got too much heart. They've shown too much fight and grit to go out like punks 4-1.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And I don't think, and as much as I may dislike Marcus Smart as a homer for the Raps, I respect, obviously, as the rest of the league and everybody that looks and talks about Marcus Smart, they respect his game, even though he flops like a motherfucker. But people say the same thing about Kyle Lowry, so whatever's about that. Yeah. But I think I pick Boston in this game 5.
All right, I kind of tend to agree with that. I don't think Boston's just ready to pack it up yet. And, when you look at how good this series has been and you look at how close last game was and Tatum didn't score a single point in the first half, just imagine he was playing regular Jason Tatum game, then the rest of those guys would have contributed.
Hard on him. He did pick it up in the second half. They kept speaking over.
Yeah. Well, but regardless, I think you're right. I mean, they have a lot of fight. They're a gritty team. They're fast. They play defensive first, but they can still put up a lot of buckets. Yeah. And, they're just sort of seem to be in their groove, even though their main guys, Brown and Tatum, are averaging 40 minutes, 41 minutes, respectively, a game. It's a lot of game to play, but these guys are still averaging over 20 points a game, over 7 rebounds. And so, like you say, Marcus Smart, too, to me, I think Marcus Smart is, he's a polarizing player, and I think that it's a massive surprise for me that he has been playing as good as he's been playing this series. I personally thought in that Raptor series after OG hit that shot and you saw the camera angle go to him and he sat on the sidelines for like 10 minutes, just unfazed and so emotionally distraught. I thought that was it. I was like, he's never going to recover from that moment, and he's only gotten better. So, Marcus Smart has been playing amazing basketball. I think that is a big storyline in the playoffs right now for the Celtics. Is like, I don't think everyone really expected him to contribute as much, and I think on that note, I don't think Kemba has contributed as much as people believe to. When we talk about people being injured, I feel like Kemba is masking some sort of injury because you can tell he has spurts where he plays his game, but he's not necessarily putting it together for a full 48. So I think, next game, I would like to see, as a sports fan, I would like to see Boston win that game as well. And I want the series to kind of stretch as far as it can go because it has been an amazing series, man. You just, one of these as a sports fan, as a basketball fan, you just don't want it to end, No.
Honest to God. You brought up Kemba. We haven't touched on him yet, and that should be really spoken to. And I don't have. I mean, I guess maybe the next time we do this, I should have the stats on hand so I can quote him. But he has looked small. He's hit some big shots. He's penetrated. He's slashed. He's cut. He's gotten into the D. He has gotten kind of bounced around a bit. He's been pinballed. But he's looked really small against the Heat. Because what is he, 5'9", 5'10"?
Yeah,
Is he
6 foot in boots, right? Like he's a small
foot?
dude.
All right, fair. But like, he's hit some big shots, but he's looked diminished, and this is his big come out. This is his big show out, right? Like he labored for so many years with Charlotte and obscurity, right? Like I remember, like the Hornets coming to town, and Charlotte would come to town, come to play the Raps, and like, oh shit, Kemba's gonna go off, and he would torch the Raps. They'd still lose, but he'd get 30. He'd get 35. He'd hit 4 threes. He'd slash. He'd kick. He'd have assists. He'd have, like he's such an effective player. There's the thing about his knee, that it's been an injury. It's been a nagging injury since last season. There's been talking on the around the league about him. His even come before he came to Boston. Charlotte let him go because of some potential knee issues, right, which have not been substantiated but often kind of alluded to. And it's been a nagging thing for him. And with this game every other day situation, even if you're not getting on a plane, right, it's not like you're fucking flying with your arms, right? Like it's a matter of just, and he's how old is he now? 20, 29?
So it's got to be somewhere there. It's got to be some. He's been playing in the league for a while.
Not a young man, right? So I mean, relatively, obviously, but he hasn't looked quite right either. Didn't look right against Toronto because Toronto game planned him. He's looked better in this series. He's been more effective, more impactful, but he has not showed out, in my opinion, this series.
Yeah, so I mean, if Boston does win this next game, they need some contribution from Kemba. They need it from everyone, right? But they need it from their stars.
20, 25, and 6, right? Like if Kemba gets those numbers, Boston wins. And in the same contributions from Tatum and Jaylen Brown, Tice gets 12 with 8 rebounds or whatever. Like, is that the winning formula for Boston to win that game? What do you think?
I think so. Yeah, I think all those numbers kind of represent what has been successful for them all year. And when they don't get that contribution from their major players, it's always been a struggle. And I think that's why partly this series has been closer than Boston maybe wants it to be, because they're not necessarily getting everything out of Kemba. And I think it's easy to kind of, put him on the back burner because Marcus Smart's playing so well, Jason Tatum's doing so well, Jaylen Brown's doing his thing, and like you say, Mike Tice, like they're getting contributions from other guys, and I think that sort of pushed Kemba Walker to the back burner. But that's only going to go on for so long, because if they do lose that game tomorrow, that's going to be the conversations. What happened to Kemba?
Yeah, well, depending upon how Tatum does, but yeah, I don't think that people are going to scapegoat Jason Tatum. I think they'll be like, look, this kid's a future. He gets a pass. He tried, he tried, but he didn't, he didn't execute maybe perhaps. So I guess the next game will tell. But yeah, you're right. Kemba will be a focus. And you're thinking about Marcus Smart too, right? Like he's one of these, kind of blood guts hustle kind of guys. Like it's not what he doesn't show up on the stat sheet, right? That's what most people say about Marcus Smart. And so the fact that he's playing as much as he is, right? And given that the league has moved over to this kind of small ball model, which the Rockets tried to take until they met LeBron, right? And then lost Daniel House with whatever that was about, the hotel room, that girl. You hear about that?
Yeah.
Okay, anyway. So, this whole movement to like smaller team, lots of switching, lots of cutting, lots of movement, right? Like that is now become the model, right? And it's funny, when they were thinking about like, again, I want to think about the Raptors again, but I shouldn't do that. We're talking about Boston, but like what could happen next year, like with the Raptors if they don't re-sign Serge, OG playing the center position, right? As an example, right? Like, you know what I mean? Right? Like that's what the centers are now. Like PJ Tucker for the Rockets playing center, right? At 6'5". You're like, what is that, right? Like, so I mean, Tice is what, 6'8" tops?
He's probably, I would say he's probably like 6'8", 6'10". Like he's a fairly big dude.
He's not 6'10".
He seems he's like Surge's size. That's what he reminds me of.
He's smaller than Surge. He hasn't got the muscle Surge. He hasn't got the height of Surge either. Point being is that like the small ball has infected the league, and it bleeds into conversations about like the obsolescence of the center, right? Guys like Joel Embiid, what is his value? Does he have trade value? Should he stay in Philly? Right? Again, another conversation off topic, but right, it all kind of migrates back to the conversation about who's playing in this series, who are the big men, what are their roles, and what are they supposed to do? You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, 100%. I think the new NBA, and this is kind of, I think, modeled by Golden State in the last few years, is the small ball works and the 3-pointers work. And if you haven't shot a 3 before, get ready, because you're going to do it all off season and hope to put up 5 or 10 throughout a game moving forward. I want to switch real quick here to the whole NBA bubble experience. Watching these games, first and foremost, I think the NBA in the major sports has done the best job of transitioning through the COVID and the isolation and everything we've been dealing with in putting on basketball just the way I feel like we remembered it. The virtual crowd, the virtual fans, a great way to continue to get people involved, seeing the faces, and kind of filling in the void and the black space in the arena as well. And then also, incorporating the crowd noise, whether that's on free throws, whether that's, on a run for the home team, the away team, and so forth. And then just the way that basketball is shot visually on a camera, the angles haven't really changed. Like, it's still the same angle, so to speak, in terms of showing the court. So like the fan experience from a television perspective, from my perspective, it hasn't really faltered. Like, I've been really enjoying watching basketball, and I haven't really, I watched some highlights of the football game, and it's weird because football, like, inextricably, the crowd is going to be in the shot all the time, and regardless of the angles you show, and it looks weird, man, when it's empty. And tennis kind of looks weird too because it's empty, but basketball, I think, has done an amazing job. And of course the social messaging as well, what they were doing. I don't know if you saw this the other day, but following the death of RGB, all the players were wearing did you see that? They're wearing like they're commemorating, wearing the what do you even call that? It's the sash, I suppose, around the neck, like the judge's sash.
The robe.
The robe. It was sort of mimicking the robe. But anyways, like my point is that the way they've conducted their business and handled going back to basketball, but incorporating everything they've done, I think it's just been a great experience so far.
So you brought up, that's a lot of thought to digest there. The bubble experience. Yeah. So by far and away, are they the only professional sports league on the planet, right, globally, that has executed this bubble sports as well as the NBA has probably made it in soccer, European soccer. Now, I don't pay attention to that. I don't care about that. I don't follow it. I've just heard people talk about how great they've managed it because they've had no cases and they played a full season and I think they had a champion or whatever. I mean, who cares, right? But I mean, I guess billions of people care, but not me.
Billions of people, yeah.
As in the Who. But yeah, so the bubble experience. So you're right. Baseball looks atrocious in the bubble with empty stadiums. The tennis looks like a fucking mausoleum. Pardon my French. Sorry, a mausoleum.
It's weird.
Right? It's just that they're playing in this vacuum, right? Like the U.S. Open, I watched a bit of that. Golf really hasn't seemed to suffer that much. But and I don't, I love to play golf, but I don't really like, I watch the majors, but I don't follow every tournament. I don't care that much about that professionally. Football, again, another sport that I'm like, I'll watch it if it's on, if it's a big game. It's these. Each sport relies on the synergy, if you will, of the crowds, right? I think that football, as a case, given that it's just started up, like the last couple of weeks, and And it relies. There's such a stop and start play, right? Where there's so much. The actual gameplay is so minute, and all the filler in between. So the camera would linger on crowd shots just to fill space for all the emptiness that is a football, the average professional football game in the U.S. So that does hamper it. I think that, in the end, I think most people in the States love football so much, like as a religion, that they'll look past that. Because they just want football so bad. I mean, keep in mind, I think the transition that all of us, where we were so starved for the entertainment value of professional sport, that we were willing to overlook a lot. And it's interesting how quickly the transition came for all of us who were into, not even into basketball, but even casual fans of basketball, how well it parlays to TV viewing. And the way that they orchestrated the screen in the back. There have been celebrities, on camera, in the crowd. They've been able to still integrate the background shots of people being at home on their webcams, but situated in the audience, so the cameras could zoom in on the virtual person sitting there on their camera. Now, look, there's a celebrity, there's an ex-NBA player, you're right. So they've managed to kind of incorporate it because, for one, it's not like in professional football, you could have 10,000 screens, right? Or maybe they could, I don't know. They've got more money than, and you could possibly imagine. Maybe the NFL could do that. But I guess the thing of it is that the NBA confines, the arena is so compact. They can have the wall. They can have 200 screens on the wall, and then there be people there so that you can still cut there, and have that, and then you pipe in the crowd noise to give the little accent of authenticity that just elevates the game, because the cameras are so focused in on the actual court, and the angles are the same but just tweaked a little bit different. One thing I did want to mention about the NBA in the bubble and the absence of fans, which I am actually in huge favor of, and I'm not the first person to mention this, and I know because we've had this conversation as well, but the fact there are no cameramen or fans in the sidelines or under the basket, and there's this increased runway for guys. I mean, I know Kyle Lowry totally benefited from there not being 5,000 people under the basket at a game, right? So he could have a runway to fly at the rim and spill off without worrying about smacking his teeth against the camera, right? I would like to see, when all of this is done, all this COVID shit goes away and the vaccine is here and we're all rescued from all of this, right? And we get back to having, TV with fans in arenas, that they just don't let people back there anymore. Yeah. That they clear it out. Right, that the owners or the stadium, they just make a pact. Maybe Adam Silver comes down with a mandate that says, no way, we're not putting anybody within at least 6 feet. Everybody from the backboard on, right, from the base of the hoop, the backboard, from that stanchion, there's nobody there. Right, you want to put people on the sidelines. I mean, guys are stepping on sidelines, going out of bounds. I mean, that was one of the biggest things, guys stepping out of bounds because they forgot where the lines are, because there was no crowd kind of as visual aids to kind of keep them centered as to where the lines were. And you got guys I watched a play, Jason Tatum caught the ball in the corner, the left side corner 3, and he looked down at his feet to see where he was, make sure he hadn't, before he did a juke move and then spun past the defender to cut to the rim, right, after faking the shot. So that is one thing I would like to see carried over when things come back to normal in the whenever it is future.
That's a very, very interesting point. I hadn't even considered that, actually. The reporters and the cameramen on the end lines, of course, Dennis Rodman remembers that more than anyone probably in the NBA history. But that's a great point. If that area of the court was left open for the players to actually continue their offensive move and not fear getting hurt. You remember LeBron got that real bad cut on the back of his head. He's got a massive scar to this day
Right.
from falling
Yeah.
into the cameraman, right? So
Right, I
I mean,
remember
this is something that has kind of plagued players for years, as it were, in terms of like really fully executing their speed on the offensive end. So that would be something when we get back to a normal basis, as it were. But yeah, I think the to touch on it, I think the game has translated really well to television, as you've said. Um, the incorporation of the small things like the crowd, the noises, and all that has really been interesting to see. I think one of the interesting things is, and I brought this up to you before in previous conversations, that in every arena they replay the fouls on the big screen. And one thing that I've really loved is not watching every single player as soon as the whistle is blown to turn up and point to the ref and say, look, 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 that wasn't a foul. Did you see that play? Like, can you go back and change that or anything? So that's something that has been driving me nuts in the last few years watching basketball, is that every time the whistle is blown, they all look up and say, hey, did you see that, ref? Like, you messed up. And another thing that I thought that was kind of funny is when there's a big emotional play that's been made, a good pass, a good play, a dunk, whatever, the players are still so um they're so used to looking at the crowd for some sort of validation that when it's happening in mid game, they're still looking out into this vast darkness and they're screaming. And I'm always wondering, like, who are you screaming at? Like, no one's in the crowd, right? Like, it's funny to watch, but you can just see how like they're so locked in, they're so emotionally engaged in the game that they're still used to the little things that they would have done had the crowd been there. But it's kind of funny to watch, because you start thinking as a fan when
Can
they
I
do
speak
the
to that
zoom
point
outs.
for a second before you move on too far?
Yeah.
The whole, like, the absence of crowd and who's paying attention and you know um, who's there to get them fired up and keep them fired up.
Mm-hmm.
It's the teammates. It's the bench. They are the fans.
Yeah.
They're the ones, right? And that has presented. I mean, they were always there, but they're kind of buried in the sea of people, right? When I would imagine when you're locked in a professional uh, regular season or playoff game, what have you, right? Like when you're locked in, you're on the court, you're thinking, I mean, you hear the roar of the crowd after you're making a great play. But in the bubble, aside from the pipe noise, right, which I don't imagine you really trust anyway or really care about, right? It'd be secondary. Your teammates, your bench, the guys that are like, jumping off their seats, waving towels and, sweats in their sweatpants, and like noisemakers kind of thing. You know what I mean? Like those are the fans that are cheering. Those are the people that are really making the impact and encouraging. And there's been a lot of talk in the bubble about that, from coaches to the TV announcers, the talking heads, about like, how important it really is. Like one thing, like Myers Leonard.
Oh God.
Right? Like how many times have you seen that picture of Jimmy Butler hitting the three or whatever, making a drive? He's doing like just the grossest fucking. I mean, it's awesome, but it just I see that and I think, man, that guy is just the biggest frat shithead. You know what I mean? Like that's the guy. When I was back in university, like I hated those guys, right? The frat dudes.
And I know nothing about Myers Leonard, but I do know of those little antics of him on the sidelines. And if you remember at the beginning of the bubble, when players were trying to find ways to feel comfortable in their surroundings, he was the guy that went on social media and was doing the beer shotgun challenge to all the players.
Right.
And was downing them in, whatever it was, 1 second or 2 seconds or whatever it is.
Yeah.
So there might be some truth to that, right? There's always been a little truth in jest.
I wonder. I'm not sure. I gotta look that up. If he's a Florida State guy, or I know because he played for Portland. He was a serviceable player for Portland. Like I remember watching him play. He was a good 3-point shooter. Average. I think he was probably like 36% kind of thing. A bit of a sieve on defense, right? Like kind of water through him kind of thing. But like he's played 0 minutes in the bubble. Like I think in the last 2 rounds, like no minutes, right? But to the point of your bench being like cheerleaders and participating, like he is like front and center with all his frat bro flexing, right? For his teammates that are, making plays, hitting shots and dunking balls and making blocks, last second blocks. You know what I mean? Like so I give that up to him.
Yeah.
As being,
well, in on that point, one thing that I took away from that not tonight's Denver Lakers game, but game 3 was Dwight Howard being that sort of cheerleader on the bench for the Lakers. And really, he hasn't necessarily been extremely effective, but I thought he had some moments in that last game where he really injected energy. And then when you see him on the bench, he is kind of playing that, I don't want to say cheerleader, but he's really playing that rally point and that rally cry for that team and trying to really energize them, because as you say, with the absence of the crowd, the team now, your bench players, your guys that you roll with all year long are now the motivating factors.
Yeah.
So I just wanted to kind of wrap up here at this point, because there's so many different areas we can go into, and I think it would be best to wait for the outcome of tomorrow night's game before we go back into anything more of the Eastern Conference. Maybe there's going to be an end to that series. We both think that Boston's going to come out and win that game, stretch this series out a little further, and then we'll see what happens from there. We'll see where we go. But I do want to say, again, it's going to show it real quick again. Thank you for coming on to the show. Welcome to the show again. This is the first of many times that I'm sure you'll be here. We talk about basketball non-stop, so I'm sure this is going to be something that goes on and on. So again, we're looking forward to the next Miami Heat game. Both of us think Boston will win that game 5. We'll see how far that series goes, just as the same on the Western Conference. We're talking the bubble, we're talking Eastern Conference, we're talking basketball playoffs. It's been a pleasure to have you on the show, Chris, and we'll look forward to having you back on in the future, man.
Awesome.
Bye, bro.